Do you ever think about the person you are, the kind of person you are? Do you ever think about the choices that led you to becoming this person? And do you ever consider if this is truly the person you want to be? These are the questions I was forced to ask myself in 2015, and having a very difficult day that led to a very difficult conversation with God. Let me just ask, can anyone here appreciate having a difficult boss? Can anyone here appreciate having a difficult coworker? Can anyone here appreciate having a very stressful job? Can anyone here understands what happens to you and your emotions when you experience one or more of these things in combination on a daily basis? That was my daily life back in 2015. See, here's an idea of who my boss was. This was the guy who had no respect for me, thought I was worthless as a person, and whose answer to my complaints was to suck it up, put on a poker face, and get back to work. I had no power, no control, no respect, and I was stuck. And in 2015, after a really hard day, I was crying some pretty big tears of self-pity and asking God for a radical change. But that radical change came in God dealing with me and pointing me to the story of the adulterous woman in John 8. See, what John 8 teaches us is we have at least 4 different kind of people we can choose to be, and God gives us the grace and the freedom to make that choice. And it's how you react and how you respond to the people and circumstances in your life that develop your personality and pretty much define who you are and who you're becoming. And God used the story to ask me, did I really want to continue becoming the person I was? See, when you look at the first character, who's not named, has no presence, yet is part of the sin of adultery, you realize this guy is selfish. This guy is devious, sneaky, and troublesome, because this guy is not standing there in the public square, yet he's the one who started the problem. He stirred up the trouble by getting in bed with her. This is the guy who's happy to stay in the background and probably sneak back into his house. No one any the wiser of who he is or what he's done. This is the guy who never takes responsibility for anything he's done, any of the trouble he's caused. See, he's more than happy to let you take the blame. And he was more than happy to let her die, even though he was part of the sin. And Alan Watson tells us he was just as liable for any consequence as she was. Yet he's not around. He left her twisting in the wind because he was selfish. And God showed me I was selfish. I wasn't climbing in the wrong bed like he was, but I wanted my way, and I wanted to do things my way. I was selfish. Okay, God, thanks. That was great. Now I feel bad about myself. Let me go home. Cry a few tears. We'll be fine. Nope. God said, let's talk about the second person, who's actually the group of people called the religious leaders, who we're going to think of like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. And God said, I need you to think about this group of guys who are essentially calculating, harsh, and judgmental. These guys who were appointed and anointed for the spiritual care and well-being of the people were actually the guys who love dragging people's problems into the public spotlight for judgment and criticism. They love censure on someone else. These are the people who loved using people's weaknesses to promote their own personal agendas and their own ideal of morality. These are the people who are super slick and super sly in trying to prove they're better and stronger and smarter than everyone else. See, again, these guys are self-righteous. They are calculating, harsh, and judgmental because they use fear to control the people and to set the agenda. And Jesus was getting in their way. So Chris Keith tells us their new agenda became having Jesus forfeit his role as friend of sinners and his identity as friend of sinners to the people. They wanted to break Jesus' connection with the people, Henry Halley tells us they did it by putting him in a no-win situation. For if he had said, yes, stone the woman, he would have been violating the Roman law. If he had said, no, let the woman go, he would have been violating the Jewish law. Again, these guys, can you see it? Judgmental, harsh, and calculating. And God said, does that sound a little familiar? See, not only was I selfish, I was also self-righteous, just like these guys. And I knew that my people at work were wrong and I was right, and I was doing whatever I could to prove it. I was self-righteous. Okay, God, thanks. Great. Let me go home and cry a little bit harder now. God said, no, we're not done. He said, we still need to look at the main character of the story, the adulterous woman. See, this woman, even though she's a victim of the Pharisees' self-righteousness, she's still part of the sin. She still got caught. He said, think about her, and yes, feel sorry for her that she's standing there. And I imagine, just like Eeyore, she's staring at her feet, cannot look up because she knows she deserves to be there. She's covered with shame and probably very little else. See, I picture this woman is either scantily clad or hastily draped with whatever she could drag out of the room with her as she was dragged out of the room. See, she had a choice. She didn't have to get in that bed, but she did because she was impetuous and she was impulsive. She chose to live in the moment without thinking about any of the consequences of what the next moment would look like, what tomorrow would look like, what would happen if they got caught. She was all about momentary pleasure. She never thought about wisdom. She never thought about the consequences. She never thought about tomorrow. She only cared about now. And that's what got her into trouble. Now got her in that bed, and now had her standing practically naked in that public square. Sin-centered impulsiveness. God said, does that sound familiar? Being a little radical and out of control with your emotions? No, that's not me at all. Just totally me. See, I was sin-centered like her. I was totally out of control and letting my emotions run wild and dictate who I was becoming. And let me tell you, being selfish is plenty. Being self-righteous is more. But being sin-centered, well, that just about broke me. And I said, okay, God, well, what hope is there for me? See, because if I'm this far beyond the point, where's my hope? The adulterous woman had no hope. Where's my hope? He said it's in the same place hers was, in the form of a Savior called Jesus. See, Jesus is the one person in the story of the adulterous woman who had compassion on everyone. Not once did he judge her, but also not once did he judge them, at least as far as we know. See, Jesus approached the situation in a very unconventional way. In dealing with the religious leaders, he was non-aggressive, non-confrontational, and often non-verbal. In fact, he only really says two things in the entire story. And that's once in verse 7 when he says, any of you without sin, go ahead and throw your stone at her. And then once in verse 11 in talking to the adulterous woman when he says, have you no accusers? I condemn you not either. Go and leave your life of sin. Here's the person full of grace and truth, offering her hope that was not there, hope she did not deserve. The one who set her free to go do better and be better and live better. See, what God teaches us is that we need to be more like the Savior. We need to be loving, forgiving, and accepting. And we need to measure our emotions, our thinking, our behaviors, and our attitudes in every interaction we have. Because who we are and who we are becoming is a result of how we're reacting and how we're responding. And we need to be working toward being God's best version of ourselves. Thank you.